Good evening, folks. Mahesh here again with Reza behind the camera. Welcome to another educational photography session. Tell me if this has happened to you before. You come across this beautiful evening scene, such as this, Seattle downtown. You take out your camera and take a picture, only to realize later that the photo is completely ruined by excessive noise because you shot in automatic mode and the camera chose an insanely high ISO value. Or let's say you decided to combat the high ISO noise by manually setting the ISO to a lower value. Well, chances are that for reasonable apertures, such as f2.8, f4, whatever, you will need a tripod to avoid blurry images. And of course, you've left your tripod behind, right? Well, what to do? Stick around and I'll tell you exactly what I would do to combat that situation. Today, I brought the lovely Sony RX100 Mark VI with me. If available, make sure your image stabilization or steady shot is set to on. Also, I've set the shutter frequency to burst. As you can see from these settings, I'm shooting in program or auto mode, and the camera has chosen the following parameters: an aperture of f2.8, a shutter speed of around 1/30th of a second, and the ISO is set at very high value of 2000. Take a few seconds to take some test shots and make sure your images are not blurry. If they are blurry, you may need to bump up the ISO even higher. Basically, I'll be taking a burst of images at very high ISO values and very fast shutter speeds, and later combining them in Photoshop using the median blending mode. It's not a new technique, but one that's worth revisiting, as not everyone will be familiar with it. And as my high school teacher used to tell me, repetition is the mother of all knowledge. Now I'm going to set the camera on the tripod and manually change the ISO setting such that it is at the minimum native value of 125. We'll compare this image with the one generated from combining the multiple high ISO images and see how they stack up. Haha, a little Photoshop pun for you guys. Without getting too technical, here's a quick explanation of how this method works. The amount of signal generated in each pixel from the scene is relatively constant. However, the noise generated from the high ISO is completely arbitrary and distributed randomly onto the pixels with each shot. By stacking the images and choosing the middle or median, not the average or mean value for each pixel, you are choosing the pixel with the true value and not values spuriously increased or decreased by random noise. If this sounds a little complicated or it's confusing, don't worry, because the proof is in the pudding, and we'll show you what this looks like when we get back to our home and process the images. Okay, so now we are here in Lightroom, and I'm showing you just the relevant images that demonstrate the editing process. The first 8 images from here to here were shot in burst mode at ISO 2000, shutter speed of 1/30th of a second, and an aperture of f2.8. For comparison purposes, here's the shot taken on the tripod, shot at ISO 125, f2.8, and half a second. So let's just look at these two images a little closely. I'm going to show you this at 100%. This is the 2000 ISO, and you can see a lot of noise, especially in the sky. You can see the plane has been nicely frozen because it's 1/30th of a second. And here it is at ISO 125, a much cleaner file. Look how beautiful the sky is, virtually noiseless. And you can see the half a second shutter speed has blurred out the motion of the plane just a little bit. So again, here is the high ISO image, and here's the low ISO image. And sort of cycling through the high ISO image, keep an eye in this area here and see what happens to the distribution of the noise as we sort of change back and forth. It's a little bit difficult to keep track of because it was handheld, but you can sort of tell if you keep your eye on the same area that the noise pattern, although quantitatively is the same, does change in its distribution. And we're going to use that quality, we're going to take advantage of that property of noise distribution to eventually come up with a cleaner image. So let's go back to our grid view. We're going to take the first 8 images, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, shift click, and I'm going to right click and say edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. And here we are in Photoshop, and the images are being loaded as separate layers. And here we go. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 images. The first thing we're going to do is align all the images so that there's no misregistration and we can have a nice smooth blending process. So I take the first image, shift click the last image, and then under edit, I'm going to say auto align layers. The auto setting is just fine. I leave everything else alone. Okay. This may take a few seconds depending on how powerful your computer is. Okay, you can see that the computer or the program has auto-aligned all our images, and let's just double check our work. I'm going to look at this at 100%, and I'm just going to cycle through the thumbnails here to make it invisible to show you that in fact it does align very, very well. Again, are you noticing the pattern of noise that's generated? It's the quantitatively it's the same, but qualitatively and distribution wise it's a little different with each image, and we're going to again use that property to minimize the image noise. Okay, so now let's continue. We've got the first image. We select, shift click the last image, and then we're going to make it into a group by dragging into this little folder icon, and it says group 1. We're going to take that group and make it into a smart object, and we do that by going under layers and saying smart objects, convert to smart object. And again, depending on how big your files are, how many images you're layering together, how fast your processor is, this may take a little bit of time. Okay, so now our image group has been converted into a smart object, and you could tell that because of this little micro icon under the thumbnail. We're going to take that group, and the next step is awfully simple. Again, go under layer, under smart object, and choose stack mode and choose median or middle value. You'll notice the noise just disappear or dissolve away. And here we go. Here is the final image, and look how beautifully noiseless your image is without sacrificing any detail. Okay, so just to show you, I'm going to go back one step. This is before noise reduction using the median blend mode, and here it is afterwards. I'm going to save this image and let's compare it to our image shot at ISO 125. Okay, so here is our TIFF image that was generated by blending the images. So let's take a look at this, and I'm going to compare this image with our image shot at ISO 125 by hitting the C key. So image on your left is the TIFF image, the image on your right is the one shot at ISO 125. So let's see how it looks. The shot on your left is the blended image of multiple high ISO shots, and the image on your right is the single low ISO shot. Yes, the ISO 125 image is slightly less noisy, but look how close that ISO 2000 image is now. It's hard to tell you the truth, between these two images. Maybe a touch bit more noise here in the very, very dark areas, but boy, it is really, really close. Isn't that great? I think this is a wonderful technique to get rid of noise. The question becomes, how many high ISO images do you have to blend in order to get a low ISO type of image? There's no simple answer, but typically for me, it's about 5 to 8 images. It seems to give the best result. The more images you do, it's sort of a law of diminishing returns, maybe minimally more reduction in noise. I haven't really noticed it, but imagine taking all those images and trying to blend them. It just takes a lot of time and a lot of frustration, more opportunities for excessive movement and things like that. So between 5 and 8 images seem to work really well for me. Try it out and see what you think. The second question is, well, can I take multiple low ISO images,
blend those together and come up with something with even less noise? And the answer is a resounding yes. You can take multiple low ISO images and then blend those together and you'll end up with an image with even less noise. So it's a great way of getting rid of noise. And that's all there is to it. Let's go back to our grid view. And I will leave you with this image of the high ISO view of the Seattle skyline blended to give you a low ISO type of image.
If you thought that was cool, stay tuned for our next episode where I show you a completely different use for the same method of stacking images using the median blending mode. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you enjoyed this video or learned something, please like it. And please also subscribe to our channel to see more educational photography videos. Basically, oh, Bob. Okay. Basically, I'll be taking a burst of image. Okay.